Hello, everybody. This is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Part 1, Chapter 29. It's all over, thank the Lord, was Anna's first thought as she said goodbye to her brother, who had blocked up the entrance to the coach even after the third bell had rung. She sat down on a little sofa next to Nushka, her maid, and began to examine the feebly lighted compartment. Thank the Lord, tomorrow I shall see Seroja and Alexey Alexandrovitch, and my good and commonplace life will begin again as of old. With the same agitation of mind that had possessed her all day, Anna attended most minutely to the preparations for the journey. With her skilful little hand she opened her red bag and took out a pillow, placed it on her knees, wrapped her feet warmly, and composed herself comfortably. A lady, who seemed to be an invalid, had already gone to sleep. 2 other ladies entered into conversation, and a fat elderly dame, well wrapped up, began to criticize the temperature. Anna exchanged a few words with the ladies, but not taking any interest in their conversation, asked Anushka for her traveling lamp, placed it on the back of her seat, and took from her bag a paper cutter and an English novel. At first she could not read. The going and coming disturbed her. When once the train had started, she could not help listening to the noises, and the snow striking against the window and sticking to the glass, and the conductor as he passed with the snowflakes melting on his coat, and the conversation carried on by her traveling companions, who were talking about the storm, all distracted her attention. Afterwards it became more monotonous. Always the same jolting and jarring, the same snow on the window, the same sudden changes from warmth to cold and back to warmth again, the same faces in the dim light and the same voices, and Anna began to read and to follow what she was reading. Anushka was already asleep, holding her little red bag on her knees with great clumsy hands, clad in gloves, one of which was torn. Anna read and understood what she read, but the reading, that is, the necessity of entering into the lives of other people, became intolerable to her. She had too keen a sense to live herself. She read how the heroine of her story took care of the sick. She would have liked to go with noiseless steps into the sick room. She read how an MP made a speech and would have liked to make that speech. She read how Lady Mary rode horseback and astonished everyone by her boldness. She would have liked to do the same, but she could do nothing, and with her little hand she clutched the paper cutter and forced herself to read calmly. The hero of her novel had reached the summit of his English ambition, a baronetcy and an estate, and Anna felt a desire to go and visit this estate, when suddenly it seemed to her that he ought to feel a sense of shame, and that she ought to share it. But why should he feel ashamed? Why should I feel ashamed? She demanded of herself with astonishment and discontent. She closed the book, and leaning back against the chair, held the paper cutter tightly in both hands. And there was nothing to be ashamed of. She reviewed all her memories of her visit to Moscow. They were all pleasant and good. She remembered the ball. She remembered Vronsky and his humble and passionate face. She recalled her relations with him. There was nothing to warrant a blush. And yet, in these reminiscences, the sentiment of shame was a growing factor, and it seemed to her that inward voice, whenever she thought of Vronsky, seemed to say, warmly, very warmly, passionately, "What is this?" she asked herself resolutely as she changed her position in the chair. "What does this mean? Am I afraid to face these memories? What is it? Can there be any relationship between the boy officer and me beyond what exists between all members of society?" She smiled disdainfully and betook herself to her book again, but it was evident that she did not any longer comprehend what she was reading. She rubbed her paper cutter over the frost-covered pane, and then pressed her cheek against its cool, smooth surface, and she almost laughed out loud with a joy that suddenly took possession of her. She felt her nerves grow more and more excited, her eyes open wider and wider, her fingers clasped convulsively. something seemed to choke her, and objects and sounds assumed an exaggerated importance in the semi-obscurity of the car. She kept asking herself at every instant if they were going backwards or forwards, or if the train had come to a stop. Was Anushka there, just in front of her, or was it a stranger? What's on that hook, fur or an animal? And what am I? Am I myself or someone else? She was frightened at her own state. She felt that her willpower was leaving her, and in order to regain possession of her faculties, Anna arose, took her plaid and her fur collar, and thought that she conquered herself, for at this moment a tall, thin muzhik dressed in a long nankeen overcoat which lacked a button came in, and she recognized in him the istopnik. She saw him look at the thermometer and noticed how the wind and snow came blowing in as he opened the door, and then everything became confused. And the tall peasant began to draw fantastic figures on the wall. The old lady seemed to stretch out her legs and fill the whole car as with a black cloud. Then she thought she heard a strange thumping and rapping, a noise like something tearing, then a red and blinding fire flashed in her eyes, and then all vanished in darkness. Anna felt as if she had fallen from a height, but these sensations were not at all alarming, but rather pleasant. The voice of a man all wrapped up and covered with snow shouted something in her ear. She started up, recovered her wits, and perceived that they were approaching a station, and the man was the conductor. She bade Anushka put her shawl and fur coat, and having put them on, she went to the door. "Do you wish to go out?" asked Anushka. "Yes, I want a breath of fresh air. I'm very hot here." She opened the door. The snow-laden wind opposed her passage, and she had to exert herself to open the door, which seemed amusing to her. The storm seemed to be waiting for her, eager to carry her away, as it gaily whistled by. But she clung to the cold railing with one hand, and holding her dress she stepped upon the platform and left the car. The wind was not so fierce under the shelter of the station, and she found a genuine pleasure in filling her lungs with the frosty air of the tempest. Standing near the car, she watched the platform and the station gleaming with light.